Jason and Maggie, thank you for hosting this conversation at your offices, and thank you for your ministry to the church. As you reflect on the legislative session that ended May 18, what one item would you like the Catholic community to know about?
I would say that one thing that we really felt this session is that prayer makes a big difference and that your voice matters. So we had a lot of people showing up for adoration. We had a lot of people praying for the issues we were working on, and they wouldn't have gotten done without that. So really having prayer first, but then also showing up and making your voice heard is so important.
Faithful citizenship without prayer is just mere activism, and we need both. I love the motto of Saint Benedict, ora et labora, pray and work. And that's really the model of faithful citizenship is we need prayer because it's important to be transformed ourselves by the prayer and the way that works on us in the life of grace and the Holy Spirit, but also in the way in which it can help till the soil for better conversations at the Capitol. And we were so encouraged by just really the providential things that we saw at the Capitol that don't seem to be possible without prayer. And I think the passage of this landmark social media legislation was really the great example of that, something that really we were able to bring together from start to finish in one legislative session. Rarely does a piece of policy legislation make it from start to finish in a bipartisan way in divided government in a shortened session in 1 year. Truly miraculous on some level. Maggie did a fantastic job of really shepherding that through the process, and we're really super proud of that.
How did the lawmakers, how did they come to be together on this issue with such a split in the House and just a one vote majority in the Senate?
I think legislators are seeing on both sides of the aisle that kids need help. Big tech, we need to put kids over the profits of big tech. For too long, big tech has had a hold, and legislators are done with that. They want to put kids first in Minnesota, and that's what we saw this session by passing the Stop the Harms of Addictive Social Media Act. It's not the first time that social media regulation legislation has been introduced. This has been building. They've had bills introduced in past sessions, but I think the politics are right, the players are right this session to actually move it across the finish line. And the bill was understandable, which helped too.
It had a simple premise.
Yep.
Let's put parents back in charge and make sure that they understand what their kids are doing online, make sure they consent before a child under 16 opens a social media account, and really foster a healthy dialogue about social media use. One of the great things about divided government and a divided legislature is that people understand that some of the biggest partisan hobby horses or things that really drive politics on either side of the political spectrum weren't going to get done this year. So legislators, to their credit, were really looking for solutions to practical problems. What can we do? We could just throw up our hands and say we're not going to agree on anything, we're going to go home. But for many, this was a surprisingly productive session, despite the divisions in state government, and the social media bill was a perfect example of that. Housing infrastructure bonds and affordable housing policies advanced much farther than a lot of people thought they would. So really in divided government, sometimes we do best as a state because legislators have to work together, identify concrete problems that are facing real people, and then try to find real solutions. And what we did was we brought a solution to the table. And that's what advocates and that's what citizens can do, is bring real solutions to practical problems to the table. That's why that bill was able to get over the hump.
It was part of a three-pronged approach to, violence in schools. And we had a tragic example of that at Annunciation in South Minneapolis in this last year. Other areas that legislation that was proposed would touch on would be banning high-capacity ammunition magazines and expanding school safety funding to include private schools. Those didn't make it. Will you try again next year as a conference to get those across?
Protecting the right to life is very, very important. What we tried to do this session with those bills was recognizing the politics for what they were and being eminently practical and saying, what could we get done in this year, 2026? And the bills, the three-part package that we proposed, something that Republicans are more inclined to like, something that Democrats are more inclined to find as a solution to gun violence, and then something that transcends those partisan divides. So that was the social media bill. So I think it's imperative that we continue to look at sensible, common sense gun regulation going forward, and we need to provide school safety funding to protect all students. There were a few buckets of funds that did pass, such as threat assessment programming and resources, that non-public schools are eligible for, but by and large, we need to have a per pupil expenditure, just like there is on the public school side, for all students and non-public school kids. So we'll be continuing to work on common sense gun regulation on one side, but also on the same side, school safety funding as well.
That's terrific. Thank you. You mentioned, Jason, some housing legislation that went further than you might have expected. What did that mean, and what are some examples?
Well, I think from a standpoint of bonding, which is infrastructure and funding projects, there's continues to be need for housing. There's affordable housing, which is typically state subsidized or government subsidized housing for low-income people. But there's also housing affordability. Can young people, for example, buy their own home? The average age of a first-time home buyer is now 38 years old in the state of Minnesota. Housing prices have gotten out of control. One solution to that is create more housing stock. So we supported the Minnesota Starter Homes Act, which has a great coalition surrounding it, and it's part of the conversation. And really framing the issue around housing affordability. That didn't pass this year, but we're hopeful that in continuing years, that becomes a centerpiece of housing affordability conversations.
Is that something that could happen as early as January when the next session begins?
Correct, and that's what the nice thing about the Starter Homes Act is it doesn't cost anything at the state level. It's a policy bill, it's a preemption bill regarding zoning, and it just says cities can't engage in exclusionary zoning practices that limit the housing stock. So it provides a toolbox of solutions for doing that. But we think that's really an important step forward. It's an exercise in subsidiarity. When the local community is not able to address that question adequately, how can the state step in and provide a solution that creates more housing stock? But housing affordability, a key piece of what we've called the Families First policy platform that we've been championing here, whether it's a child tax credit, whether it's social media regulation for families, whether it's housing affordability, whether it's school choice, really focusing on the well-being of the family is a cornerstone of our advocacy, and then offering real concrete policy solutions that support those initiatives.
And those efforts will continue, eh?
Absolutely, they will, yep.
Yeah.
The family, as the church tells us, is the domestic church, the first foundation of civil society. So much what we do at the legislature, and even in the culture, is remediating the effects of family fragmentation, family breakdown, challenges within the family. If you get the family right, a lot of other good things happen. And that's something that we really have to focus on as a Minnesota Catholic Conference, giving voice to that constituency that doesn't have a special interest group advocating for it, which is the family.
Were there other aspects to this session that showed success despite the division that maybe went under the radar? Anything you can think of?
Yeah, we had overall a really good session. There were things that didn't pass, which was really helpful. So the IVF insurance mandate and in vitro fertilization, that legislation has been stopped now, I think, for 5 years, but it continues to be in the conversation. We have tried to reshape that conversation around restorative reproductive medicine, because IVF really is not the best medicine when it comes to treating infertility, which isn't the disease in itself. It shows that there's an underlying problem or disease that needs to be taken care of.
Physician-assisted suicide did not get one hearing this biennium, which is a tremendous success. We've been able to stop that bill 12 straight legislative sessions now. That will certainly come back because proponents are so adamant about it. But we think because of our advocacy that really focuses on the threat that legislation is to vulnerable people, it's been able to build a strong bipartisan coalition, and people recognize that when care is expensive and killing is cheap, which do we ultimately think will prevail, and how will that impact vulnerable people, the disabled, the chronically ill, the elderly, the poor, the marginalized, how will it exacerbate racial disparities in healthcare? So people are starting to recognize that there are a lot of reasons why we should say no to assisted suicide, and that's just not something that Minnesotans really do or feel good about.
We started with prayer, and the Minnesota bishops all came to the Capitol this year and spent time with people in prayer. More than 1,000 people participated. The bishops and the conference provided testimony on legislation, held meetings with 118 of the 201 legislators. You mentioned some of the fruit of this. Is there other fruit that, you mentioned conversations and ability for people to meet a little differently than they might have otherwise? We
think that legislative engagement and legislative contacts moves the needle. We agree with the church that politics is one of the highest forms of charity because it serves the common good, and that when you actually have conversations with legislators about issues that matter, that moves the needle. So you had that statistic, 118 out of 201. That's pretty extraordinary for a small staff and some bishops during the course of a short legislative session. We try to engage the people in the pew through the Catholic Advocacy Network to reach out and engage with legislators, even if it's just sending an email. But most importantly, as you said, Joe, to pray for them. We think prayer matters. We think it changes hearts and minds. And legislators are encouraged knowing that while they do their difficult job, they're encouraged by people praying for them. And that matters as well. So that's a service that we can provide to the legislators. We have a legislative chaplain this year. For the first time, Deacon Kevin Keneally, who prayed with the legislators, was a resource to them, talked through difficult issues with some of them, helped them navigate their responsibilities. So politics really is one of the highest forms of charity. And we believe in the old school sense of politics is that great conversation about how we order our life together, and that it is a rational process rooted in reason. So we want to be a rational voice in those conversations, bringing solutions to the table.
We are constantly trying to increase legislative engagements and help make it even easier and put tools in place to make it even easier for Catholics to connect with their legislators. So we've seen a huge growth on social media with engagement there. We've seen a growth in legislators being willing to talk with their, with constituents being willing to talk with their legislators. And the legislators respond back to them, and I think that helps. It's not just a black hole that you send a message to, but we get lots of messages coming back to us that says, hey, I heard back from so-and-so, this is what they said, or that was so cool, they actually responded to me. And when you have that personal experience, it makes you want to do more of that.
We think legislative contacts matter. We keep track of those things and we say, are they moving the needle? And who are our contacts speaking to? That's helpful for us to know. It helps us get meetings easier when legislators know that Catholics in their community are concerned about issues. Their doors are more open to us as lobbyists and staff. So it's really a team effort between the bishops, the staff, and the people in the pew to get good legislation moving forward.
I've signed up for that. I've used it. It has gotten easier and easier. You go in, you see an issue, you tap into that issue. There's an email that'll go to folks, and you press the button to say submit after adding your name. It's beautiful.
It's so easy. We just try to lower the barriers to participation. So many people don't know what they should say, when they should say, how they should say it. We try to make it as easy as possible. We, of course, want people to personalize their messages if possible. Even better, reach out to your legislator, bring some friends, try to set up a meeting. But the Catholic Advocacy Network makes it super easy for people. We had 11,000 people take 11,000 messages sent in to legislators this year. We'd like to see 50 or 100,000 in a good year. We think we just scratched the surface in terms of getting Catholics aware of the issues.
Minnesota House was split 67-67 between Democrat and Republican this last session. The Democratic Farmer Labor Party held a one-seat advantage in the Senate. This November, every seat in the legislature is open to election. How might Catholics think about this election season?
Well, Joe, you've hit it right on the head. Every legislative seat is up for election. We hear things, well, state politics doesn't really matter, or I contact my legislator and they're talking about their congressman and not their state house or state senate member. 95% of people, this is anecdotally, from speeches and presentations we give, cannot name their state house member and their state senator. Yeah. Now think about how challenging this is. We don't even know who's making the laws. How can we expect that the laws they make will be good? And think of the issues, the important issues we've been talking about in this conversation, whether it's social media regulation, assisted suicide, housing affordability, you name it. These important decisions are being made at the state level, so we need to get to know our candidates. We need to talk to our candidates, form relationships with them, and ask them questions about how they would govern if they were elected. We'll have a whole slate of resources on our website at mncatholic.org, including candidate questionnaires and other such resources, like election logistics. We're going to have a primary election on August 11th, which is going to have more importance than perhaps it's had in any year in recent memory. So Catholics can't just be looking to November 3rd, they need to be looking at August 11th as well to the respective party primaries.
mncatholic.org. With that material to work with, I think it'll be a good thing.
And again, I want to emphasize our materials transcend the partisan divides. We offer resources and questions that help people engage candidates and elected officials, no matter what their party.
Yeah.
Our goal is to build common ground for the common good, and hopefully our Catholics and people in the pew will do the same and be hopeful and encouraged about what happens when you build relationships with elected officials and share your concerns with them.
The next legislative session is scheduled to open January 12th, 2027, and run through May 18. What will keep you busy in the months leading to the session?
And none of the issues that we've talked about today are really going away. So we have a lot of work to do, soil to till, on things like the IVF insurance mandate, things like physicians assisted suicide, building up, getting testimony ready, getting more engagement in certain areas, finding physicians who want to talk about it, finding Catholics who want to talk about it, things like that. But really just building for session 2027 on the key issues that we know about right now.
We did just today a post-mortem on the session,
Right.
what worked, what didn't. And I think we evaluate that. We say, how can we build on our strengths, improve on our weaknesses, seize on opportunities, and mitigate threats. So a lot of our planning at the legislative level and our work at the communications level will be addressing those issues. But again, it all goes back to helping Catholics be faithful citizens and creating easy ways for them to do it. We can only do so much as lobbyists. We need the help of the people in the pew. So we'll be going out speaking to churches, parishes, schools, especially Catholic schools, because we are likely to face the issue again of cuts to non-public education, non-public pupil funding. We still haven't opted in as a state to the federal scholarship tax credit, which is a hugely important issue. Already 30 other states have done so, and it's important that we do that. Legislators come in with a couple key things that they really care about. On the rest of it, they're formed by their constituents, their caucus, and their conscience. And so Catholics as constituents of elected officials need to be a part of that process and communicating with them, and especially as they're out there on the campaign stump making promises and talking to people and kissing babies. It's really great if Catholics can engage candidates and say, hey, what do you think about this issue? And maybe get them thinking about an issue they hadn't thought of before, and maybe try to get them on record or get them to commit to a position that affirms human dignity and promotes the common good.